From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
It's the new Horrorween for 2024.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. We are the original podcast about consumption, and we are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous episodes, this episode, and all the other great shows at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is Count Dingleberry in the Flaming Asshole of Transylvania, or as he prefers to be called, Sean, who is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. Sean, how are you doing today?
I mean, after an intro like that, how could I say anything but great? We are halfway through. This is the halfway mark of Horrorween for 2024.
Some would argue this might be the high point of Horrorween. I don't really know. It's up there for sure.
Just the halfway point or this specific episode?
This specific title.
Oh, okay. All right.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
I don't know.
see.
We haven't recorded it yet, so it could go into the shitter real quick.
That's true. Could go either way.
What have you been watching this week, Sean? I know there's one thing that I think we both got through, but have you had anything else you want to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of stuff. Some stuff I wanted to watch and some I didn't, but I sat with my eyeballs open and I watched it, so I guess I'll talk about it here. The first thing, I really did enjoy this one. I watched Rebel Ridge, which is on Netflix. I talked about it, or I think I talked about it, but Jeremy Saulnier is the director. He's directed a few movies that I really like, Blue Ruin and Green Room. This one doesn't have the color in the title, so I'll give it to him. Yeah, I know. Be better. But it's basically about a Marine that he comes to a small town. He's in a small town, and he's trying to get his cousin out of jail. And through all this corruption and stuff, he runs into some bad cops and some corrupt cops. Some of them are one and the same, and he deals with it the way that a secretive hand-to-hand martial arts Marine instructor guy would handle it. It's entertaining. It's like some part thriller, part action movie. I think all of it was wrapped up in a nice package, so I enjoyed that one. I also watched the 30 for 30 Chuck and Tito, which is season 3, episode 34, in case you're keeping score. And it's basically about Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz and their trilogy of fights and how they paralleled the rise of UFC from being this podunk, like no rules fighting championship tournament, whatever, to, having a commission, having it be sanctioned, spreading across the nation. The third fight they fought was in 2018. A lot of the story or a lot of the stuff in this episode, in this 30 for 30, kind of ramp up to their final fight in 2018, and they didn't do it in UFC because they were both long retired by then, but they did it with Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy MMA, which I think this may have been the only event or only pay-per-view or whatever they ever did, because it lost money, because it had 50,000 buys or something like that, which is really low considering I think the last UFC event that was just this past weekend probably had over 1 million buys. I watched...
Hey, we all got to start somewhere.
That's right, got to start small, but they folded, so whatever, fuck them. And then I also watched, against my will, my younger daughter, bless her heart, and I think her heart's in the right place, but she was really dead set on watching the magnificent feature films known as Paul Blart Mall Cop 1 and 2, so
They made 2?
Yeah, they did. They unfortunately did make 2.
Why?
Have you seen them?
No, that's Kevin James, right?
James, yeah. The Mall Cop.
I think I've seen part of the first one. I remember, doesn't he run around on a Segway or something in that?
Yeah, that's pretty much his thing.
Okay. I think I watched 10 minutes of it and said that's about enough for me and wouldn't turn it off.
I mean, like I said, I got to praise my daughter. She's a chip off the old block. She loves watching shit. So that's good. We've already got that established, right? But I watched the first
different
one.
Kind of shit, though.
Yeah, exactly. Got to refine that taste of shit. The first one I watched, and I maybe had a chuckle throughout the entire movie. And the second one we watched just yesterday, I did not. Nobody in the family even remotely had even a snort. It was so not funny.
Not even your daughter that had you watch it?
I think she maybe laughed at one thing, but afterwards we did the poll, everybody watched it. Everybody in the family watched the second one. So which one did you like better? And it was unanimous. I mean, my pick was neither, but if I had to pick one to have toothpicks inserted in my eyelids so I couldn't close my eyes, I would much rather be the first one over the second one, because the first one just takes place in a New Jersey mall. Okay, whatever. The second one is spoilers. He goes to Las Vegas. And there's, of course, a Las Vegas. Like Steve Wynn from Wynn Casino is in this thing very briefly in a cameo, and he doesn't say a single word, even though they are addressing him. Like, oh, Mr. Wynn, thanks so much. Thanks for blah, blah, blah. And he just stands there with his like plastic smile, just, ear to ear. And there's even like a place where they could have him say something, and maybe they did. And maybe they just like rolled that same footage of him smiling, nodding knowingly. And it was just awful. So that was what I watched for, I was going to say pleasure, but I didn't watch Mall Cop, either Paul Blart Mall Cops for pleasure. But those are the things that I watched for what I wanted to talk about. And then I think the other thing, I know exactly what you're going to say. So how about you tell me the other things you watched, and then we can get into that last thing.
Before that,
do you have questions about Paul Blart Mall Cop?
More specifically about Kevin James. Do you have a Kevin James title, movie, show, or otherwise that you actually like?
Absolutely not.
I'm not talking about where he might just wander into a scene for like a minute. I'll excuse that. I'm talking about a movie that he's supposed to carry the load.
The only thing... Did he carry himself? He is a load. The only thing that I ever liked that Kevin James did, and it was because I was a teenager and I was stupid, was that MTV Sports show that was kind of like Wipeout, and I can't remember what the name of it is right now. He did the commentary, and it was a Dan Cortez hosted show, I think, and they did like obstacle courses and shit. Like I said, it was like Wipeout, but Kevin James was the announcer, and I think that's the only thing that he's ever done that I was like, this is pretty good, but it was super early in his career. I mean, I think he was already a comedian at that point, but I can't remember what that's called.
I don't know what that is, but it doesn't appear to be listed on his IMDb, so it must be good. Yeah, just looking through here, like there's like, I don't hate the Hotel Transylvania movies, but I don't like them either. Like there's really nothing in here that makes me think like, yeah, this is a guy who needs to have 49 acting credits with 3 in the can that haven't been released yet.
What about that MMA? Here Comes the Boom. I'm like scrolling through his IMDb so I can find that show.
I know. So am I. I never watched it, so I don't know if that's any good or not. I don't know. I didn't hate his show, The King of Queens, but I think that's mostly because I had Jerry Stiller on it. I just saw it as an extension of Frank Costanza, even though he's
the Seinfeldiverse.
Yeah. But yeah, he just kind of scrolling through here. Like, again, I'm not counting stuff where he just kind of walks into his scene. Like, I don't remember. Well, shit. None of these are good. Fuck it. Even the stuff, I can't even see anything in here where he does just wander in, I'm assuming, and is worth mentioning.
MTV Sandblast. That's the show that he was on, that he was the announcer for.
Did Adam Sandler produce that and call it Sandblast? Because that sounds like something you would do.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know how else Kevin James would get hired to do that unless it was Adam Sandler presents Sandblast.
It will be linked in the show notes. I'm sure I'll find a YouTube clip.
Oh, good. I can't wait. So what did I watch aside from the overarching thing that we were going to skip? I watched Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Why?
For some reason. Primarily I listened to our friends Scott and Mark over at You Run. They did their episode on it, and I won't go as far to say that they said it was good, but they said it was definitely improved. And I'll give them that. It is definitely an improved movie from the first one. Like, the effects look better, the masks look better, blah, blah, blah. But I found myself a lot of times in the movie saying, why are they still fucking talking? There's way too much fucking talking going on in this. Like, I don't need this to be an hour and a half. You could make this literally a 30-minute kill clip of just, it doesn't even need to be Winnie the Pooh as far as I'm concerned. Just guy in bear costume killing things. I would have been content. The story's still nonsensical, but it's slightly better than the first, I guess. Basically, they retconned the first into being like, they did this in Halloween 3, actually. They kind of retconned it so that the first movie took place in this fictional world, and they actually show them watching the first movie at one point in it. So I guess that's how they can explain away, like, the budget that went up in the second movie. I mean, as a whole, it's definitely not the worst thing that I've watched, arguably, this week. But it's not anywhere close to great either. But I watched it, so it's a thing. It's definitely a movie.
That's debatable. I haven't seen it. I think it's debatable.
That's a movie,
yes.
Or that it's better than the first?
That it's a movie.
I mean, that's fair. It does a lot of, like, knocking off of other, like, there's nothing really original in it. Like, a lot of the kills that you see, it's like, okay, I've seen that in, I watch piggybacking on that. One of the kills is I think it's Pooh takes a shotgun and, like, gores a guy with it, like, through the abdomen. I'm like, oh, that happened in a Halloween movie. So in no particular order, I went back and watched the Halloween Thorn Trilogy because I was like, I don't remember how that Michael Myers cult thing went. I better sit through this again all in one day. So I watched Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and Halloween 4 is fine. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I think that's, if I remember right, the one where he gores a dude with a shotgun. Like, you have the shotgun. Why wouldn't you just shoot him? No, he has to shove it through his abdomen and impale him with it. So, that's a thing.
As you do.
As you do. I do like that Halloween 4 has, much like Halloween Ends, it has a posse that gets rounded up to go like, we're going to take out that Michael Myers motherfucker, type of thing. Except with Halloween 4, it's like 15 fat dudes that they call the local beer bellies. Like, that's what the cops call them, as opposed to the entire town. It's very, like, more, I don't want to say it's more sedate, because they end up, like, pumping, like, they definitely turn the unlimited ammo cheat code on before they start shooting at Michael Myers, because this scene goes on for, like, 2 solid minutes of them just, like, unloading on him. I'm like, how's this? All right, whatever. And then, Halloween 5 and 6 is just kind of downhill from there. Like, all logic is gone. It's funny because if you watch all 3 of these together, I know there's supposed to be a trilogy type, like, and a trilogy implies that the events of part 1 affect the events of part 3. They kind of do, but it also is like abundantly clear, like, they had no idea that they were doing a 3-movie arc like this. This got rebranded as a trilogy somewhere around the time that episode 1 came out, because that was all the rage then was, we have this new word. We have to make every movie series a trilogy now. But those are fun. And then I know you like this one, so this is a more fun rewatch. I rewatched the original Fright Night because it's on HBO right now, and I was like, well, can't go wrong with that. It's just vampire shenanigans, right?
And not with, who did I think it was? Chris Sarandon before? Not Chris Sarandon.
Oh, yeah, not him. So I thought you were talking about the remake, the Colin Farrell one.
Oh, no, I like that one too. What do you think of the
one's all right.
Which one do you like better?
Definitely the original, but the remake's fine. Like, it doesn't do anything necessarily wrong. I almost wish they would have called it something other than Fright Night and just had it be its own original vampire movie that feels like it's borrowing from Fright Night as opposed to calling it a remake. So if your biggest problem with being a remake is that you probably didn't need to use the name of the original that you're just throwing on there to sell tickets, you can do a lot worse, I guess. But I definitely like the original has, although it had a lot of spots that kind of lulled, like there was a lot of downtime between shit happening from what I remembered from the last time I watched it years ago. It's just got that 80s like cheese and schlock and practical effects and all the stuff that I like to see. So I prefer the original, but I have them both. I wouldn't get rid of the remake.
Yeah, and I think if, like you said, if they called the remake something else, it wouldn't have got as much. I don't know. I feel like the new one, the remake, gets a lot of hate about just because it's not the original, essentially. But I liked it.
Well, it's got Colin Farrell in it, too. And I feel like if you put Colin Farrell in your movie, there's like a 60% chance that people are going to shit on it before they even see it just because Colin Farrell's in it. The only exception that comes to mind is the new Batman movie.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. Yeah, I could agree. You got me there.
He's kind of like Ryan Reynolds up until he did Deadpool. Like, as soon as you saw his name in it, because he did that Green Lantern movie, people, and I know you don't really like Ryan Reynolds to begin with, but like people are just like, oh, fuck this guy, because he did the shit Green Lantern movie, which means his entire career is dog shit now, which, okay. But so yeah, those were the main things that I rewatched. And then the other thing that I know we both made a point of watching because we wanted to kind of touch on it is the new mini docu-series. Was it 5-6 episodes on Mr. McMahon, which is about Vince McMahon, the former owner and CEO of WWE, turned heel to play Mr. McMahon, which might or might not be a character. I'm still not 100% sure. I mean, I'm not really too concerned about like spoiling this because, to be honest, I'll put it out there because I know you'll have something to say here momentarily, but I'm kind of disappointed in this because for a 7-part or 5-part, or however many, a multi-part miniseries, I would have really liked them to go into the stuff that's happening with Vince McMahon now dramatically more. And they tell you at the beginning of every episode, like, this case is still breaking and unfolding. It like basically broke as we were recording this. Everything was recorded before that, and then Vince McMahon pieced out because he wasn't going to answer any more questions. Okay, now I'm not going to act like I'm the Vince McMahon scholar. Like, I didn't know everything that was in this documentary, but I also, like, there's a big chunk of the WWE that I just kind of blank out on, which is basically after Stone Cold Steve Austin up to current, more or less. So anything from whenever that would be, like, 2005-ish probably, whenever he left.
Yeah, early 2000s.
Yeah, that's kind of a blank spot for me, but I don't feel like they really gave anything in this documentary that wasn't either known or readily available to find out. Like the stuff that I'm interested in, I don't feel like they barely scratch the surface on, if at all.
I would agree. I feel like it felt like it really stopped talking much about the WWE in general once the WCW merger stuff came into play. So really after the Attitude Era, once the merger happened, it kind of didn't really expand much. I mean, it's a good documentary if you're looking at something about the history of WWE, because there was a lot of stuff in there that I didn't necessarily know about, like the really early days. Like I didn't know how some of the stuff came about. I had always wondered how how Vince McMahon managed to collect all these wrestlers and put them in the WWF and kind of push out these other territories. I had no idea how that actually happened. Like obviously you know what happens because there's only one, or for a while there was only one real big promotion, but I didn't know how it happened. So that was cool to see that. I didn't know stuff about McMahon himself, about him not living with his father or not knowing his father really until he was 12, which I've just assumed that was his dad and that's how it was. And, you know, just like most people grow up with a family, either their mom or their dad, I guess he lived with his mom for the first 12 years and his dad just kind of swept him away, and he didn't sound like he really ever saw his mom much after that, and it didn't sound like his home life was all that great either. But yeah, I mean, it's a good kind of historical look at WWE and the parallels between him and McMahon between the Federation and McMahon, and then that character that was born out of the Attitude Era, which is probably the best heel character in wrestling of all time, really. I mean, it's the ultimate, like, my boss is a dick and I want somebody to beat his ass, essentially.
I feel like it would have to be between him and Hollywood Hogan, like between the two.
Yeah, but I think McMahon's even more so, because where Hogan's somebody that had always been the babyface and had always been the wrestler that, at least since WWF, that everybody oh, he's the real American and whatever, he's going to beat everybody. And then he finally turns heel and everybody hates him. And it was crazy to see all the shit that was getting thrown at him when that actually was announced, because I don't know if I was actually watching wrestling when that had happened. And you can go back on Peacock and watch like most of those events and stuff. Yeah, it was a good kind of, this is probably the third time I've said this now, but who's keeping count? It's a good historical look at the WWE, the WWF, Vince McMahon, his life, but all these other details, they start at the end of the series. It's 6 episodes at the end of the series. And this is on Netflix, by the way. I don't know if we've ever mentioned that, but by the end of the series, they start to kind of talk more about his affairs, and they talk about his family, and they kind of scratch the surface on a lot of things, like Shane kind of getting either stepping aside or getting pushed out of the business. And now Shane, I think he runs like AEW or something. I don't know. I don't really keep up on it. I mean, the most wrestling I watch is I'll watch WrestleMania when it comes on, and maybe I'll catch a pay-per-view, or it's not even a pay-per-view now. It's just an event that's on Peacock. I might catch one of those, but I kind of fell off until some of the most recent WrestleManias. But yes, long story short, very long story, slightly shorter. I would like to see maybe a little bit more of an expose about Vince McMahon, and people talk truthfully and openly and honestly about their opinions. But in the meantime, I'll just go on YouTube and continue to watch shoot interviews from people reacting about Vince McMahon and all the allegations, and the ones that feel like he can't hurt them anymore, like he doesn't have any hold over their career, can now speak freely, hopefully. And, I'll just watch those interviews instead. I mean, it was a good show in the respect that you got to see interviews with some wrestlers. You got to see some really cool footage that maybe a lot of people hadn't seen before. If you're not a big wrestling nut and you don't watch all these old YouTube retrospectives that hundreds of people put out, or thousands or millions of people put out, I don't know. But other than that, I didn't really learn much more than I already knew, because admittedly, I'm deep down the rabbit hole and looking at shit like this, about this.
Well, you're deeper down it than I am, but even I don't feel like I learned a ton that I didn't know. But you said it exactly right. This feels like a very good retrospective on the WWE or WWF, whatever we want to call it. But you're right. I'd like to see more of the expose on Vince McMahon. And I almost, now that we're talking about it, kind of get the feeling that a lot of these guys, because you see Triple H and, Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan, all all the guys who are not dead that you would expect to see in a documentary about Vince McMahon, they're all there for the most part. It kind of feels like, now that we're talking about it, like maybe these guys aren't saying things honestly because they don't want to implicate themselves in something. So you almost wonder if, like, once the case is, you know, done, if there's a trial, it's gone through, or a settlement or whatever they decide to do, because God knows it could be either one of them. Once all that shit is like blown over, if maybe then they'd be a little more willing to talk openly about it, as opposed to kind of beating around the bush with it.
And I'll even say, I know that you've said it in the last, I don't know, couple months, like I can't wait to see the expose about Vince McMahon after this all blows over and yada, yada, yada. And I didn't realize this whole limited series was even coming out until maybe like a week or a couple weeks before it came out. And I was like, well, I want to watch this. But I've held the opinion the entire time that we're not going to hear.
Yeah.
Especially, we're not going to hear it on the A&E WWE biography show. Nobody's going to talk shit about Vince McMahon because it's a WWE sponsored thing. Like, they're giving them access to these people to talk about this shit. Yeah, I'm still waiting for the real thing.
Well, and again, after it all blows over, even if he goes, let's just say it's the worst and he goes to prison for the rest of his life, the company's still in his family's name, because doesn't his daughter run it now? Her and Triple H, aren't they like in charge of it?
They don't own it.
Oh, it's sold again?
Yeah. They're on the board, but they don't own it. It's Endeavor owns it. So it's owned by the same company that owns UFC now.
I thought they were the control, whatever.
They might be, yeah. I think they have 49% or something of the stock, but they don't.
Oh, no, that's right, because they don't have, that's why he couldn't like let himself back in.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
With his stupid strut that he does.
Yeah, that's why you gotta love to hate him.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's been our extended wrestler corner for the week. It's been a while
for the week. Well, it is Horrorween and wrestling. Maybe next year we'll do an all wrestling Horrorween, but we're not there this year.
Teaser.
That sounds terrifying, but that's for next year. So until then, unless you got anything else you want to say about Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon, or the WWE in general, we're going to take a break and come back and talk about Night of the Demons.
I got 2 words for you, John. Suck it.
Hey, this is John, and I am excited to tell you about another exciting podcast that you can find on the You Run Podcast Network. If you like spooky stuff, then check out the Paranormal Misfits podcast. This podcast features your favorite besties diving fearlessly into the paranormal, uncovering mysterious phenomena, unraveling mind-bending conspiracies, and sharing their thoughts on all things horror. Head over to yourunpodcast.com now and check out the Paranormal Misfits podcast, as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network. All right. Eat a bowl of fuck. We are back, and we are going to talk about the movie Night of the Demons. This is probably one of the movies that is the whole reason that this fucking show exists, is because we like shitty 80s movies, and this is a movie. So we're going to start with a third-party review. This one comes from Sergey C. on Rotten Tomatoes.
And he says, radical dude.
Close. Says, love the 80s vibe and the coffin sex and that final scene. But the story and the demons just look, well, they didn't do it for me. Popcorn half out of 5 stars. I don't know how he gave it popcorn half out of 5 stars, but that's what he gave it.
Drier than a popcorn fart.
So, Sean, what's this movie about?
All right, so for that, we go over to IMDB and we type in the search box Night of the Demons, and it tells us that this gets a 6.1 out of 10 out of 20,000 ratings. It's up to number 2339, which is out of some number, and it's up 1831 spots from some other number at some other time. Have no idea when that is, but we talk about the storyline and the plot, and we go to the one on the top, which I think is the plot, maybe. It says, 10 teenagers party at an abandoned funeral parlor on Halloween night. When an evil force awakens, demonic spirits keep them from leaving and turn their gathering into a living hell. And then for the other one, I guess it's a storyline because that's what it says here. This one comes to us care of Crystal, who is available at davids_drummer_chic@hotmail.com. It says, on the night of Halloween, 10 teens decide to go to a party at an abandoned funeral parlor. Hull House, rumored to be built on an evil patch of land and underground stream, is the place. While starting the party, the teens gather around a big mirror to perform a seance. Big mistake. They awaken some evil force and find themselves trapped and taken over one by one. Now it's a battle for who can survive and cross over the stream before going to hell.
Sean, before we go any further, or before we really get rolling on this, why don't you tell us about the cast or the director or whatever you want to tell us about this movie?
Well, I'm just going to talk about the cast because it's, there's a lot of people. There's actually not that many people, and I'm only going to touch on the few that I personally recognize. When I talk about who's in the cast, I generally look through the cast list, and if it's somebody I recognize, and I say, oh yeah, they were in that other thing. What was that other thing? And that's kind of what I talk about. So none of these people I really recognize other than Linnea Quigley, who plays Suzanne.
Yay!
There you go. And we've got Kathy Podwell, who plays Judy, and she was mostly known, it looks like, for Dallas, the TV show, and the revival of that, and Billy Gallo, who is Sal. And he's mostly known for this. He was in Pretty Woman, and he had a reoccurring role in Who's the Boss, starring Tony Danza. He's kind of the greaser analog in this movie, because if it's the 80s, let's face it, you have to have like a greaser character, right?
You're not going to touch on Hal Havens, who was in Parks and Recreation and the movie Life and the TV series Lethal Weapon?
There you go. That's Hal Havens. Do you like, I know Life, I know of the movie, and I know obviously of Parks and Rec, and I know of one of the other things that you mentioned, but have you ever recognized this guy in anything else?
No. In fact, I barely recognize him in this because he only is Stooge for like a quarter of the movie, and then he's like Demon Stooge.
Demon Stooge. Jeff Jeffcoat looks familiar. He's the kid. He's the younger brother. He looked familiar, but I looked him up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've never seen. He's like a working actor, so he's been in a ton of stuff. I mean, he's got, well, not a ton. He's got like 50 credits, but I don't recognize most of any of this other shit that is on his IMDb. I mean, Sliders. He was in Sliders. I guess that's something. Punky Brewster. But yeah, that's the cast.
I can't remember Sliders at the moment. I remember Sliders the hamburger, but not Sliders the...
Oh, that's good.
Was that a show or was that a movie?
Yeah, it was Jerry O'Connell, and it was kind of like they slipped between time.
Same as Joe's Apartment, but okay.
Or Dimensions or some shit.
Yes. Joe's Apartment and other guy.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel the need to do a Cliff Notes version of this. I feel like our plot it's not whatever. The first one you read, it's pretty accurate. It's basically just
it could be the storyline,
Halloween. Oh, whatever it is. This is kind of one of, in my opinion, and I have a feeling you agree with me, this is kind of one of the definitive like Halloween party movies. Like this movie is pretty thin as far as plot actually goes in it. Like this is really an excuse. We're going to take 10 young people, put them in this house, and then we're going to have boobs and violence that ensues for like an hour and 20 minutes. And that's going to be what this movie is. Is that fair to say?
We get those first 40 minutes of the movie, and it's a lot of the building of the story and the character. It's kind of a slow burn for those first 40 minutes. You start to see the dynamics of the group, and we spend that time at home with Sal showing up at Judy's house, and the interaction with the brother that I thought was pretty funny. And then they just move on to the trying to get to the house, to the whole house.
Funny and weird.
Yeah, but I thought I laughed. Hey.
It is funny, but it's funny in like a...
nice knockers, or whatever he says to his own sister. Weird.
It's like 8-year-olds really impressed by his sister's hooters, but whatever.
I mean, I was too. I'm just an 8-year-old at heart.
Learning about you every day. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, then it's basically a big demon party movie. And I have to say, like, I remember when this movie came out, and I mean, I was young. It's 88. And to mention, I know we're just kind of throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks, but this is available to watch for free on Tubi and Pluto and a few other places. Again, it'll be linked in the show notes. But I remember when this movie came out, and it was one of those things where a bunch of my friends in middle school or elementary school, whatever, had their first real quote unquote date night with girls. And they were all, girls from my neighborhood that I knew. And needless to say, I wasn't invited, but I remember... because I didn't have a middle school girlfriend. But it was just one of those movies where it always lived in that place in my head where it was like, I have to see this movie when I can finally see it. It's one of those movies that I've always kind of lived in my brain. And it premiered in Detroit.
Really? Yeah. I didn't know that.
It was like a regional release. So Detroit was one of the first places that got premiered.
So I didn't know that, but that explains why I used to see it around, because this movie has a lot of similarities to Return of the Living Dead. Aside from having Linnea Quigley in it, it's got a lot of like, at the time, like underground punk bands that like pop up in it. It's basically a movie about young people partying and fucking, similar to like, it's similar vibes to that kind of movie.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was like, younger and going to a lot of shows, like there was always people wearing Night of the Demon shirts. And for me, this was a video store aisle find. Like I saw that cover with Angela on it and it just said Night of the Demons. I'm like, that's freaky looking. And I have to see it. Like that's like, I don't know what the fuck this is. Like it kind of freaks me out. But now it's one of the posters on my wall down here because I was immediately like infatuated with it. Like this seems like it's going to be, it just feels like the kind of movie that's like, this movie fucks in like a way that no other movie has fucked before. Like that was the way that I thought about it in my little prepubescent mind. For me, this was like an early VHS rental. I remember being one of like 2 people in my middle school and high school that had really seen it. The other was a buddy who I know he's still a fan of it too. I won't out him because he doesn't listen to this anyway, I'm sure. But it was always one of those movies that it's like back when I was a kid and like, I'm sure you had this too. Like there were those horror movies that people knew, like your Halloweens, your Fridays and all that type of shit. And then there was this like other level of what became known as B movies. And this was like one of those like crown jewels of the B movie fandom. And this is before the internet and before Tubi and before you could just find any piece of garbage and be like, yeah, I watched that piece of garbage too. Like you kind of had to be selective about your garbage that you were going to watch.
Garbage is hard to find. So when you found a real piece of good garbage, you had to hold on to it tightly.
Yeah. And it was a different kind. It wasn't, like I said, now that's the weird thing about garbage now. Like so many people now, like they don't ever take the time to actually embrace the crap that they're watching. Like this is the problem with streaming. If something sucks, it's easy to just hit the back button and go to something else. If you only had $4 and you rented 2 movies with those $4, shitty or not, you're watching those 2 movies, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was.
Pretty much.
So that's why we have like 20 Hellraiser movies, right?
You mentioned something. You mentioned about Angela being on the cover, and she's the cover girl of this movie, but she really, I don't know, she feels like she plays second fiddle to Suzanne, who is Linnea Quigley's character, to me. I mean, she's like the prom queen, or she's like the queen of the demons, but she seems like she just doesn't have that much screen time.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's interesting that she's kind of like the queen of the demons. She's like the lead demon in this movie, but she's also not the first person who becomes a demon. Linnea Quigley is the first person who gets possessed. And then we get to watch her and Angela make out for a little bit and no complaints there. It's a great, if I'm going to have to watch demons possess people, this is the way I prefer to watch it, is them making out with Linnea Quigley, preferably before she goes full demon in the movie. Or maybe not. It's fun when she goes full demon too. But it's kind of interesting, like the way they like show the casting on here. I feel like your 2 main characters in this movie are Angela and Suzanne, or Linnea Quigley and whoever plays Angela, whose name I can't remember.
Amelia Kincaid.
They are way down the list as far as like the top cast on this movie. If you're just looking at IMDb as a point of reference, and I feel like this is one of those movies where they've really kind of shuffled the names. Like Judy and Roger should be high up there. I feel like that's fine because spoilers for this 35-year-old movie, they're the ones that make it to the end of the movie. But I really feel like Angela and Suzanne are like, they're the reason that you're watching this movie, right?
I feel like, yeah. I mean, if you watched a trailer, they're pretty prominently featured. I think they're the 2, like we said with Angela. Now I'm getting confused because her name's Amelia and her character's name is Angela. She is the one that is prominently featured on the cover. She's the one that in the trailer, the one who gets fucked up the most, basically, or that you think. And then we have Linnea Quigley, who also shows up a lot in the trailer, and everybody else just seems like these kind of side characters. And if you were just to watch the trailer, you would go into this and not probably even think that there were all these other characters. I would watch it and think, oh, okay, well, it's about these 2 demon succubus type characters, and really it's about getting away from them.
Well, I also think this movie is 100% a product of its time. And I think if you were to like go behind closed doors and listen to a pitch meeting for this movie, and I'm not talking about the YouTube channel that does pitch meetings, I'm talking about an actual pitch meeting, I imagine it would go up the nose with some Coke and go, all right, we're going to get these two hot chicks and they're going to be basically naked through the whole movie. And they're going to turn into demons for some reason and like kill a bunch of people. So cut print. Like this movie, dude, and I'm saying this from a place of love because they did remake this movie and I don't think you could remake this movie this way and have it be like, I feel like every other word out of Stooge's mouth is the word bitch, calling someone a bitch.
Yeah, somebody.
In this movie.
Yeah. And
like I said, the sexuality of both Angela and Linnea Quigley, or Suzanne, very, very much on display in this movie. And I'm here for it, but I don't know that they would go that easily, like go over that well. Even the one that was remade, I think that was in like 2007, 2008, something like that. I don't remember that one if it's so like overtly like, sexualized like this one is. But I feel like there would be a lot of people being like, we need to tone this down or we need to make this less like, here's these two girls on display while chaos ensues. And again, I'm saying that from a place of love because I absolutely love this movie because I love Angela and Suzanne and would watch them do everything they do in this movie 100 times over and will continue to do so for the remainder of my existence.
Do you feel like watching it this time, do you feel like it, to me, maybe this is less of a question. When I watch it this time, I don't feel so much like it feels like a 1988 horror movie to me. It feels like a throwback, like late 70s, early 80s movie, just with the way it's paced and some of the grittiness of it. Like they don't make, I hate to use this cliche, they don't make movies like this anymore, but it just has this.
You're right.
Yeah, they don't, but it has this grit to it. And it just, I feel like it's such a slow burn, especially that first half, like I talked about earlier. That first half of the movie is building up all these characters, finally getting to the Hull House, the funeral home, and then kind of setting up the situation to come. And then a lot of it's this cat and mouse until that last maybe 25 minutes where they really start to chase these guys, these different people around and try to establish these people escaping at some point.
I would disagree with you. One of the things I wrote down is I feel like this is one of the definitive 1980s movies. Like, I think if you were to put a top tier of like three, and I actually went this far to think about it, like three movies that say 1980s in horror, like three movies that define it. And I'm taking away franchises just for the sake of argument. I'd say it's this, Return of the Living Dead, and Killer Clowns from Outer Space are the most like over the top, beat you over the head. This is a 1980s movie. And I agree the pacing is off on this one a little bit because this movie does start kind of slow. It has like a little bit of a bump in the middle, and then it kind of drags a little bit again until you get to the third act where it takes off again. But just the look of this movie, the way that the actors are acting, the music choices, the low budget effects. I love the effect with Angela where she's quote unquote floating and based off everything else in this movie, I'm sure she's just standing on a skateboard and there's someone tied a rope around the trucks and they're just pulling her through this hallway or something. Like, I'm sure that's all this effect is, but it looks great for what this movie is. I honestly feel like this is, if you were to say, I want a movie that encapsulates what it feels like to watch a 1980s like VHS horror movie, this would be very high on my list, if not the first thing that I point you to.
I have not made such a list.
Well, I haven't made a list, but
I mean, you did. You just told us the top three.
I thought of just three, not a whole list. This three list.
More than one is a list, technically, right?
I guess.
My to-do list.
Suppose.
Wake up, go to sleep. That's my list.
That's usually my list too.
No, I mean, since you brought it up, I think the effects are, for the budget that this movie had, I don't know what the budget is, but
amazing.
I think they look amazing. Like I was really impressed with the effects. Like the only ones, the makeup effects specifically looked really good. The only one that kind of looks a little bit like, could go either way, could be kind of dicey, is when the guy, and pardon me for not remembering what his exact name is, but when the boyfriend, when he gets his eyes gouged out and you can see it almost has that like Terminator robotic, like prosthetic, whatever, animatronic look to it. I'm trying to come up with the word, but it has this animatronic look to it. And that's really the only place when I'm like, that looks that's a little dicey.
I'd still rather see that than a CG version of it. Though.
Yes. Yeah.
Because at least it holds up. Like it does look cheesy, but it holds up and it fits the time of the movie.
Well, you say cheesy, but it doesn't look that cheesy. It just looks a little bit out of place compared to how well a lot of the other special effects were done. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about just straight up practical effects like the makeup, the way the characters look once they transform.
I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the lipstick scene because that effect.
You can tell that's rubber body, but
you could tell. So that effect, you could tell now. That is an effect that 100% HD upscaling does not help it at all.
Oh, I'm sure.
But if you, and I haven't done this recently, but if you go back and watch like a lower quality shot of it, it looks dramatically better than what you would see now. Because now it just looks like you said, it looks like a rubber tit where they managed to slip the thing in.
Yeah, you can see like the texture of this. I don't mean to sound like a creep, but you could see like the texture on the nipple and it looks off. Like you can tell something's going on. The lipstick doesn't quite color the chest plate like it does her skin, because the next shot, it's her actual chest and it's colored with the lipstick. And you can be like, oh, okay, no, why does the lipstick look a different color? But like you're saying...
I've done all the research and I can tell you it is definitely not her real tit.
You've done extensive research.
Yeah.
Besides, outside of touching it.
Well, maybe someday. To answer your question about the budget, it was a $1,200,000 budget.
Really?
Estimated.
That's pretty good for an 88 horror movie. They must have expected a pretty big return.
Well, they didn't get I guess they doubled their money. I don't know what you call this gross $3,109,904. So a little bit more than double its budget. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's good, but I don't know in Hollywood terms what's considered like a big return.
Yeah, it probably did what they expected it to do. They got a little bit of money out of the idea, and there you go.
Yeah, well, they ended up getting 2 sequels and a reboot.
Yeah, there you go. It paid off, hopefully, in the long run, maybe.
Outside of the pacing issues that we've kind of touched on, is there anything any negatives you have on this one?
I really like the humor that's in the movie, but I feel like a lot of it's really front-loaded at the beginning of the movie. And then as the movie goes on, they do throw these little quips out there. One of them that I really liked was, I think Suzanne says something to Sal about, like, this is your home now. And he says, I live in a nice place with plastic slipcovers on the furniture. Like, just stupid off-colored shit that people say. But it feels like once we get out of that first scene of them trying to get to the house, then it starts to kind of fade. Like the humor starts to drop off considerably. And then towards the end, obviously it's a horror movie. You're supposed to be scared. You're not supposed to be laughing. But they really are few and far between with the little quips or little funny things that people say. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the humor throughout the movie. Like, instead of hitting you so hard over the head with it at the beginning, pushing it to the end too.
Yeah, I could see that. That's fair. I'd say outside of the pacing, I don't really like the character Stooge. Like, he's got some of the most memorable lines, but he also
he's such a dick.
Exactly. And that's kind of fine. Like, this is a movie where, you have a character like him that's such a dick that it's like, well, he's going to get his eventually. And he kind of does. But I almost feel like I would have liked to seen him get his worse, because instead you get to see him come back and be like demon pig fat guy for a while. I feel like if anyone in this movie deserves like some comeuppance, it was Stooge, and he kind of gets it, but kind of not really. Outside, I don't know if this falls under pacing, like from an editing standpoint, there's a few scenes that really just go on like a long time. And I know like the story, like the one in particular, and this is kind of like a mixed opinion, like Angela's big dance scene in front of the fireplace. Like, on the one hand, I'm a male and I find her attractive before she becomes a demon, so I'm not complaining about the fact that she's basically doing this little peep show dance for like 5 minutes screen time. But if I'm watching it from a movie perspective, it's like 5 minutes of strobe light and like I'm like, Jesus Christ, can we
it's Bauhaus.
Move this shit along?
What the fuck? You don't like Bauhaus?
I didn't say that.
Well, I mean, you're implying it.
No, I was complaining about the strobe light, not the song.
Okay,
all right.
Fine. All right. Forgiven.
That'd be my only real thing with it. As far as other stuff, this isn't really a negative, but I'm going to just hit on a couple things that I always forget about with this movie that I really like, and I'll let you hit some, and then we can kind of wrap on it. I always, when they get to the end and they're trying to escape the house and they get to that big wall and they start grabbing the razor wire, every time that I watch this movie and they grab the wire and they start like screaming in pain, I'm like, why are they in? Oh, fuck. I always forget that it's like barbed wire, razor wire that they're grabbing on. every time it slips my mind, and every time I'm like, God, that would really fucking hurt to try and like lift your weight up with razor wire. And I'm like, I can't even imagine how much, like, that's one of those, you see those horror movie scenes where you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
That's one that always hits me every time.
Well, the thing too, like you were saying about not HDifying it doesn't help. I feel like HDifying it does help a little bit, because I could imagine seeing it in some shitty quality and not even realizing until minutes into them trying to climb out of there that, oh, that's actually barbed wire and not just some wire.
And yeah, that's always, like I said, I always think it's just some like conveniently placed like wire or rope for them to climb up, and then until I realized like, well, that's a half truth. The other thing that I really like in this movie that we didn't mention is the opening credit sequence it's weird because it's very cartoony and it feels very out of place, but very like right at home in this movie at the same time. Like it's like a total tonal change in the first like 2 seconds of the movie, because you have this like, it feels like a Halloween special type like animated intro to the movie for what becomes a very smutty horror movie after this. And I just kind of like that juxtaposition between this is what we're giving you to start the film, and then it just goes downhill from there.
I just thought that intro sequence just goes a little too long. It's like 3.5 minutes.
I would agree with that.
Of you sitting through
that's
it. That's
absolutely
like,
true.
Okay, this was cool.
That kind of falls on what I said about the editing. Like,
yeah.
I use Angela's dance as an example, but there's several scenes where it's like, all right, we could chop a minute or so out of this easily.
Choices were made.
Yeah. How about you? Any scenes or things in particular that you want to touch on before we start kind of moving into hot dog territory?
Well, I like that whenever the spirit kind of travels on its own, it travels in this floaty kind of first person camera angle. Goes with last week's episode, like FPV doesn't have to be found footage, and found footage doesn't have to be FPV. This is a little bit of an FPV portion of this movie that is, I just think it's kind of a cool trick that they have it be this disembodied thing that floats off and does its own thing. One of the things that it's a plus and it's a minus. Once the movie starts really cooking, they get split up, and it almost feels like each one of these people have their own little anthology story inside the movie, because you're following, the dude, the coffin sex people, the doctor guy and his girlfriend, and they kind of go off and do their own thing with Judy and whatever the other guy's name is that I can never remember. And then Sal, and he's trying to be the tough guy in this little section. They're all collected together at the beginning of the movie, the middle of the movie, and then at the end, they're just split off. I would have liked to have seen, I don't know, I feel like I would have liked to have seen some more of them kind of getting together and banding together rather than it becoming like a pair-off thing at the end. Because it seems like every group is just two people. And I don't know, I feel like there would be something more fun about it being this cat and mouse if there were more people in each group for some reason. It just feels like there'd be a different dynamic to the movie. And maybe that's on purpose. I mean, now that I'm saying it out loud.
I have a new goal in my life, and that's to be referred to as a coffin sex people.
No, hey, you're young-ish.
Sure. All right. Well, before we wrap into hot dogs, I want to take a second. I want to let everyone know, if you are in the Metro Detroit area, we are going to be showing this movie for Franks and Steins this month at Batch Brewing. We'll be in Corktown at Batch, outside under the pavilion, I guess. So, yeah. So we're going to be showing this. Come out with us, have a couple beers, have a couple hot dogs. We'll be watching this movie. It's going to be a blast. We'd like to have you out there and watch Night of the Demons and all its Linnea Quigley and other people goodness. So with that in mind, what time is it, Sean?
You forgot to mention it'll be on Devil's Night.
Oh, it's going to be on Devil's Night because this guy says so. You haven't heard from you in a while.
Too many buttons to push over here, John. What the fuck? Can't be all sneaking up on me.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask that our special guest reviewer, whatever his fucking name is, because it's been a while since we said it. What time is it? I want you to lead us off for hot dogs, demon guy.
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
I'm gonna give this movie a 0 out of 10 because the demons should have won. They should have won. It's bullshit. It's total bullshit. And why do they turn them into zombies? They shouldn't be zombies. They're like zombie demon dudes. They should just be demons. And the demons should win because that's what demons do.
You don't even get a point for Linnea Quigley and Angela?
All right. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. How's that?
All right. That's pretty generous. I appreciate your thoughtfulness in such manners. All right. Well, since that guy, I think that's his name, that guy, we'll just call him that, has spoken, I'll go ahead and move into who's next? Whose hot dog is this?
Whose hot dog is this? That's yours?
Nah. I love this movie. This movie is not like, as far as like the technical aspect of it, this movie is probably a solid 7.5 out of 5, 7.5 out of 10.
Damn, that's good.
Yeah. It's, there's a lot of problems with it as far as pacing. There's problems with it as far as like the plot is super thin, blah, 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 all that shit. I don't care. Like, this movie is fun. These characters that are in it, the ones that I do like, I like a lot, being Angela and Linnea Quigley. I guess I have a tell. But this movie is probably like upping itself just on nostalgia a lot, because this is a movie I fell in love with at a young age, probably younger than I should have. It's just got fun punker kids being dipshits and getting into shenanigans, and chaos ensues. It's really got a little bit of everything that I like. Maybe you could just speed up the pace a little bit. They don't. That's fine. For me, I don't need to wax on it all day. This is really like 8.5 demonic like lipstick tubes out of 10 hot dogs for me.
And it's got a killer soundtrack.
And it does have a killer soundtrack.
And for the second time today.
Whose hot dog is this? That's yours?
My turn. So I think Night of the Demons is really interesting because I said it earlier. I feel like this is like a late 70s, early 80s movie that came out in 1988. I don't know what it is about it. There's just something to me. Maybe it's the grittiness. Maybe it's the way that it's filmed, or the way the characters are. Something. It just has almost like an anthology Tales from the Dark Side kind of grittiness to it. And I like that about it. I think the special effects are well done. It feels like, regardless of what the budget is, it sounds like it's, for 1988, if it was anything over $1 million for this kind of movie, that seems kind of high. But I thought the special effects were really well done. I would almost watch this just for the effects, because I think that they're that well done. In the end, for me, I feel like it's mostly a cat and mouse story, and it has these demons or zombies or whatever that are chasing the victims to convert them into their kind, like their demon kind or whatever. And it doesn't really feel like there's much of an end game. Like we're just going to convert these people into zombies or demons or demon zombies or zombie demons. And that's kind of going to be it. I don't love this movie as much as you do, but I still like it. I'm going to give it 6.5 boil covered zombies out of 11 hot dogs.
You'll probably cut this out.
Speechless.
But if you had the infatuation with Linnea Quigley that I do, which you higher.
No, I get it.
There we go. All right.
You got a type, John, and that's fine.
Yeah, well, if that's true, I do. All right, so we're going to move right along to question of the week, and this week's question was kind of simple. It is based around the theme of this movie, sort of. We asked, what is your favorite movie to watch on or around Halloween that is not a part of the Halloween franchise? So if you answered Halloween 1 through 13 in any way, shape, or form, we're not reading that. That's not what I'm looking for. Anything other than that. I do think I kind of skewed the answers on this a little bit, because there's two people that answered based off the question, or the picture that was in the question, which has
question.
Ernest.
God damn you giving me the answer of what I asked you about.
God damn it. So we're going to start over on Instagram, and the first person is Space Cowboy 2381, and they say, as crazy as it sounds, Ernest Scared Stupid is a movie that I absolutely watch every October. Ernest Scared Stupid is the picture that I use, so it might have led a little bit of that.
Hey, it's a perfect Halloween movie.
It's entertaining for what it is. It's a stupid movie, but it's Ernest Scared Stupid. What else do you need? Switching over to X, Twitter, whatever this thing is now. Our friends over at Stu World Order at SWO Productions says, Trick or Treat for me. It's a holiday themed movie, and it's a lot of fun. Have you ever watched that movie? Because I haven't sat down and watched that.
I've seen the other one, Hack-O-Lantern.
Okay. And I've seen the 1980s one. I think it's the rock one with Ozzy and Gene Simmons, where I've seen that one. He's referring to the one, I want to say it's the early 2000s one with the kid Sam, that it's an anthology movie. And I'm starting to think maybe we should have watched that this year, because we've got 2 anthology movies in Horrorween, but we didn't do that.
Maybe next time after, 2 years, because next year will be wrestler horror movies. Maybe we can watch anthology.
Wrestler Ween. There we go.
Wrestleween.
Weenamania. There we go. Anyway,
Anyway,
back on X over at Pop Culture Reflections podcast. Justin says he's also a URN Podcast Network member. We like that.
Is that what he
he's
said?
He's a good guy. That's exactly what he said.
All
he
right,
says,
next one.
Return of the Living Dead, because paramedics and cops taste good, and Tarman is the best creature of all time. So again, I'm a Return of the Living Dead fanatic. This has been stated on this show plenty of times, including on our episode. Where I'm going to pinpoint here, Tarman is the best creature of all time. I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah, I was wondering what the look that you were giving was, if you agreed or disagreed.
I don't. I mean, I like Tarman. He's fun. He's in 1 and 2, but all time?
Is he in 2?
He is in 2. He comes out of the sewer where the kids are.
I know. I posted a clip of that on my YouTube channel for the old thing, and the video has zillions of views, but there are always, it's got like a couple million. Yeah. And people are always like debating, that's not the real Tarman, that's not Tarman. It's like, who gives a fuck?
Why would they make a second Tarman?
He's in a different barrel.
I mean, I guess that's plausible, but seems unnecessary. Our friends over at Dissect That Film, you can follow them at Dissect That Film, and we were on their show recently talking about Friday the 13th, but you should check out all their episodes. They say, one of your favorites, Child's Play, and it's got this little red-haired fucker Chucky peeking through a window. Little son of a bitch.
Somebody should just hang him in a closet, close the door.
Duct tape him to a pole, punch him in the face repeatedly. At Harris Dam says, Ernest Scared Stupid is a classic. Again, shouldn't have led with Ernest. This is what happens. And then our friends over at Podcast in the Woods, also You Run Podcast Network members, say this is it's campy, cheesy, and fun. It's a good movie per se. No, but damn if it doesn't put me in the Halloween mood. And he's referring to the movie The Barn, which I've never seen this movie, but it looks like it has a barn and some fucking demon looking things going to fuck shit up. Have you ever seen it?
With a title like The Barn, I feel like I have to see it.
Well, you know what? Add it to the list.
All right. It's a big list.
Sean, do you have a movie that you like to watch to put you in the mood for Halloween or on or around Halloween?
I feel like for me, the movie that I would say that fits that bill, fits that question, answers that question, is Night of the Living Dead. It's a movie that seems like it was shown on like over-the-air TV around here, around Halloween, sometimes on Halloween. And it's just the movie that I think of when I think of movies around Halloween time that, you know, that kind of fit in there. It freaked me the fuck out when I watched it the first time at my friend's house, and he lived down the street. And I remember having to walk home in the dark and thinking that around like every tree down the street was like some zombie, you know, waiting to hit my head on a gravestone or whatever. So yeah, for me, it's gotta be Night of the Living Dead. It's just the classic, you know, not the original zombie movie, but the original new zombie movie.
It's the original zombie movie that matters.
Yeah. I mean, there's like Astro Zombie and there's all those movies, but they're not real zombies. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't ever really.
They don't do zombie shit.
Not like that.
Not like these zombies do the zombie thing.
I'm actually not that far off from you on this. Like, aside from the obvious ones like this, or, you know, Thou Should Not Be Mentioned This Week in the Halloween movies, I always go back to the old Universal movie, monster movies. Almost every year I watch, especially when I'm home, like, because we have, you know, kids in the neighborhood and stuff. I don't want to have like Terrifier on or something, like terrify a kid. I like putting it on like, maybe more candy for me.
Fucking golf cart.
Yeah, get your fucking golf cart off my lawn. I like the old stuff. Like, I really enjoy going back and watching The Wolfman or the Bela Lugosi Dracula, the old, again, the Universal black and white original movies, basically everything up to Bride of Frankenstein. Those, I don't watch them all every year, but any of those, I usually skip The Mummy because that one didn't really do much for me. But those original monsters, there's just kind of something about them. Obviously, they're not as like produced as anything that we got past the silent era, because they're all from the 30s and the 40s. But there's something they have a charm about them that you can't really beat, in my opinion. And they work really well on the actual day of Halloween. Like, I don't know what those are rated. They're probably not all PG by like today's
non-rated
standards.
if they're that old. They're
all just really good, like, you know, generic, spooky, great Halloween movies to me.
Bela Lugosi is dead.
This is true. So we've given you Halloween recommendations. We've talked about Night of the Demons. I've babbled about Linnea Quigley again. It will happen again. We haven't gone through her whole filmography yet. Still got to talk about Creepazoids and Stripperland and a bunch of other movies of hers.
Isn't Vice Academy one of hers?
Vice Academy 1 and 2 are hers.
Wow.
And that's not even some of the good. Well, Vice Academy is pretty fun. I think she punches a chick in the asshole in that movie. That's pretty good. Yeah, anything you want to add before we start wrapping up on this one?
I just wanted to ask if you had sour balls.
I don't. So I don't have the same problem as the clerk in this movie.
Good. Good to know.
So with that in mind, we're going to take our sour balls and we'll be back next week where we'll be talking about more horror shenanigans as we continue the march through Horrorween. Until then, we do ask that you please do go check out all of our friends over at the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. You can find all of the great shows there. Find something that you like. If you like us or if you like podcasts in general, there's something there for you. You can also find all of our episodes there. Or you can go to our site, which is crap.town. If you like to leave us feedback, you can do that at our site, again, crap.town, or on any of our social media outlets, which we are at Dewey Pod Monster all over the fucking place. And we have a YouTube channel, which we occasionally post stuff on, which is also at Dewey Pod Monster. Sean, what else is going on?
Eat a bowl of fuck. I'm here to party.
End the show right there.
You can, I was going to say, thanks to everybody who's been clicking the thing. What do I say here?
I don't know, but it doesn't matter. You should have just left it at that.
If you want your answer to the question of the week answered on this here show, or read on this here show, I should say, follow us on social media at Dewey Pod Monster. We post the question of the week on those social medias, and you can answer the question, and it might get read on the show. And other than that, if you want to follow me on my Michigan craft beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can follow me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy.
That's it. That's all we got. Eat a bowl of fuck. We'll be back next week. Cheers.
Everybody needs a little mutant thing. Bastard. A little mutant bastard. That's what you said.
Everyone does need a little mutant bastard. Or I guess that's what I don't remember. It's been so long since I've watched that movie, and it's not even what we're talking about this week. So,
not to put too fine a point on it, Sam, the only mutant bastard in your bonnet.
Anyway,
I like the horror. Let me start that over. Jesus Christ. I'm looking at my note, and then I said
like the horror too.
I said the exact opposite thing of what I wanted to say. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the horror. Jesus Christ.